She is barren, your grace, and worthless besides. 5 years wed and nothing came of it. So I'll ask no settlement at all, only that the notes against this house be given up. Valerian, Duke of Hartlyn, who had come into that shabby drawing-room to buy a debt, and not a woman, crossed the carpet without hurrying, looked once at the widow standing straight-backed by the window with her hands loose at her sides and her eyes level on his, and said one word quietly, so that half the room did not catch it. Perfect. Mr. Hubert Pellery took it for agreement and laughed and began to talk about licenses. The two aunts on the sofa took it for cruelty, and one of them made a small shocked noise into her tea and looked delighted. And Mrs. Missant Stroud, 24 years old, widowed at 22, listed aloud in her uncle's parlour like a horse with a spavin, heard it and did not flinch, but something went out of her face, and Hartlyn, watching her, saw the exact moment she filed the word away in whatever place a person keeps such things. He was a man who had gone 39 years without explaining himself to anybody, and it did not occur to him for months that anyone might require it. What he had meant was this. He had ridden to Pellery's house that morning to buy up £4,000 of bad paper, and had walked into a room in which a family was disposing of one of its own, and every soul in it was lying. Pellery was lying about the debt. The aunts were lying about their affection. And in the middle of it stood a woman who had just been told, in front of 6 people, that she was worth nothing at all, and she had not wept, and she had not looked at the floor, and she had not begged. She had lifted her chin 1/4 of an inch and met the eye of the coldest man in 3 counties as though she were doing him a courtesy by allowing it. Perfect. Not the emptiness they were selling him, her. They were married 11 days later in the chapel at Hartlyn by license, with the steward and the housekeeper for witnesses, because he could not stomach a public wedding and did not think she could either. She wore grey. He had sent word that she might order what she liked from town, and she had ordered nothing, and he understood, dimly, that this was a kind of message and could not read it. Hartlyn is a vast, grey, beautiful house on a limestone shoulder above the moor, and for the first 3 months his wife moved through it like a woman who expected at any hour to be told what she was for. She rose early. She learned the names of the servants inside a fortnight. She asked permission for things nobody had asked permission for in 20 years, a book from the library, a fire lit in the small parlour, and each time she asked, something in him tightened, and each time he said yes in the flattest voice he owned. Because his voice had only ever had the one setting and he had never before minded, she thanked him for everything. That was the worst of it. She thanked him for the fire in her own bedroom. In November she found the orangery, which had been shut up since his mother died and had 11 panes out and a lemon tree in it that was not quite dead. She did not ask for that. She simply began going there, and he began, without admitting it to himself, to find reasons to cross the West Court in the mornings. He watched her from the library window one hard bright day in December, kneeling on the flags in an old shawl with her sleeves pushed up, packing straw round the roots of that ruined tree, talking to it. He could see her mouth moving, and he stood at the glass for 1/4 of an hour, and the thought came to him plainly, with no ornament at all. She has been in my house 4 months, and I have not once made her laugh. He had the glazier up the following week. He did not tell her he had sent for him. She found out from the man himself, and came to find Hartlyn in the estate room, and stood in the doorway and said, "Your Grace, the orangery," and stopped, and he saw her decide not to say whatever it was, and she said "thank you" instead, and went away. He sat there afterwards for a long time. They began that winter to have something. He would not have known what to call it. She read at one end of the long room and he worked at the other, and one evening she said something extremely dry about the vicar, and he laughed an ugly, rusty sound that startled them both, and she looked up, half frightened and half pleased, and after that she said things on purpose. He found her in the long gallery at 2 in the morning in January, in a wrapper with her hair down her back, walking the length of it because she could not sleep. He should have withdrawn. He fetched a branch of candles instead and walked with her, and she told him about her father, who had been a good man and a bad farmer, and he told her about the winter he was 9 and had been left at Hartlyn alone at Christmas because his parents preferred the continent. At the end of the gallery she stopped and looked up at him, and the candle was between them, and he had never in his life wanted anything the way he wanted to put his hand against the side of her face. He did not. She said good night. He heard her door. And still she watched him, always with that small braced stillness, the way a person watches for the bill to be presented. In February his cousin's wife came for 3 days. Lady Vessing was a handsome, agreeable woman with a mouth like a paper knife, and at dinner on the second evening she laid her hand on Millicent's wrist and said, warmly, "My dear, you must not mind the county talking. They will talk. I say it is the greatest good fortune imaginable that Hartlyn should have wanted a wife and never needed an heir. Why, it is as though the two of you were made to answer one another's want." Hartlyn set down his glass. Across the candles, his wife smiled and thanked her and agreed. He came to her sitting room after Lady Vessing had gone up, and found her at the writing desk with the household open and a candle at her elbow, and she rose at once, as she always rose. "Sit down," he said. She sat. "You agreed with her. She was quite right, Your Grace." "Was she?" "Yes." Millicent closed the book and squared it, and folded her hands on the top of it, and he saw that she had prepared this and had been carrying it about for some time, waiting for a door to put it through. "I have never misunderstood our arrangement, and I hope you will not think I resent it, because I do not. You needed a wife. A house like this wants a mistress, and you have not the temper for the marriage market. And you needed one who could never complicate the succession, and I am that. And it is the only thing about me that anybody has ever found useful, and I have made my peace with it." Her voice was steady and reasonable, and it went into him like a splinter. "You said it yourself, in my uncle's drawing room, in front of the whole family. He told you what I was, and you said perfect. Millicent, so there is no need," she went on, "for you to trouble yourself with kindness. The glazier, and the mayor, and sitting up with me in the gallery at 2 in the morning as though I were a person you had chosen. I would rather you did not, Your Grace, because it is very hard to keep hold of a bargain when the other party keeps being gentle about it." She looked at the candle. "I thought I would say, too, that if my being at your table is a burden, if you should ever wish to be free of the sight of me, I am perfectly willing to go to the Dower House. It is a very good house. I should be quite content there." Hartlyn stood in the middle of the room and discovered that a man may be struck dumb by a woman's civility more completely than by any blow. "Do you know," he said at last, "what I was doing at the age of 22? She looked up, thrown. "I was standing in my father's bookroom being told that I had one duty in this world, and that it was to continue the name, and that everything else about me, my mind, my temper, my preferences, my whole person, was of no interest to him whatsoever except as it bore upon that. He had been told the same by his own father. It is the family religion. He came and sat down opposite to her, which he had never once done in that room. I settled the succession that year on my cousin Vessing's line. It is done, and has been done these 17 years, and it is written and sealed and cannot be undone. And I did it long before I ever heard your name, not because I could not have married and gotten hair, but because I'd made up my mind that this house should stop eating its people. Ask my lawyers. Ask Vessing. He has known since he was a boy. She had gone very white. Then, when your uncle stood in that room and priced you at £4,000 and told me the one thing about you that made you worthless to him, he was telling me, without knowing it, that you had spent 5 years being valued the way I was valued at 9 years old. He found his hands were unsteady and put them on his knees. That is not what I meant by it. I will tell you exactly what I meant, and then you may do as you like with it. There were 6 people in that drawing room, and 5 of them were lying. Your uncle was lying about his debts. Your aunts were lying about their grief at parting with you. And you stood at the window and were sold in front of your own hearth, and you did not weep, and you did not plead, and you looked me straight in the eye as though you were granting me an audience. His voice was not cold now, and he could hear that it was not, and he let it be heard. I said perfect because I had come to that house to buy a piece of paper, and I had found the only honest creature in the county standing at the window. Not what you cannot give me. You. I have never once wanted anything from you that you have not got. Millicent Stroud put both hands over her face and wept as though something had broken loose that had been fastened down for years, and Hartlyn, who had not embraced another living soul since he was a boy, got out of his chair and knelt on the carpet beside her and held her badly and did not let go. The county dinner at Hartlyn was in April, and Hubert Pellery came to it uninvited. He had been dining out on the connection since the summer, telling anybody who would sit still that he had made the match himself, that the Duke had got a bargain and knew it, and that the girl had come without a penny, and without prospects and without, here he generally lowered his voice, any hope of the usual sort. Hartlyn had heard it 3 times at second hand and had done nothing, because he had a horror of a public scene. That evening Pellery said it in the marble hall to a knot of 4 gentlemen 10 feet from where the Duchess of Hartlyn was receiving. And I say it plainly, sirs, she was barren and worthless, and I was uncommon glad to be rid of her. The hall went quiet the way a room does. Hartlyn crossed it. He did not raise his voice. He never afterwards raised his voice. "You will not use that word in my house," he said, "about my wife." He turned unhurried to the room, 60 people, the whole county, the candles blazing in the great chandelier over all of them, and went on in the same flat tone he used for the drainage accounts. "Mr. Pellery came to me last spring with £4,000 of debt and offered me his brother's daughter to be quit of it. I bought the debt. I did not forgive it. It is in my strong room tonight. I have let him keep his roof and his consequence for a 12-month out of regard for my wife's name, and he has spent that 12-month telling this county that he made me a bargain. He let that stand a moment. He'd not make me a bargain. He made me a gift, and he had no notion whatever of what he was giving, and neither had any of you. I would not part with her for the whole of this county and every acre in it, and you have all now heard me say so, and I do not intend to say it twice." Pellery's face had gone the colour of tallow. "Your Grace, uncle," said the Duchess of Hartlyn, and the whole hall turned to her, because she had a voice that carried when she chose to use it, which was perhaps 4 times a year. She came down the 2 steps and stood beside her husband and put her hand through his arm. "You will not be ruined tonight," she said, quite gently. "I have asked his Grace not to call in the notes, and he has agreed, because I will not have word spoken in a courtroom with my name attached to it, and because I find I have no appetite for it at all." She looked at him steadily, the way she had looked at Hartlyn across a shabby drawing-room a year before. "But you will not dine here again. Not this year, nor any year. I hope you will be very well, Mr. Pellery. Good evening." He was gone out of the county by Michaelmas. Nobody asked him to stay. Afterwards, when the last carriage had gone down the avenue and the servants were putting out the candles in the hall, Hartlyn found his wife standing in the orangery with her shawl round her shoulders, among the lemon tree's first real leaves in 11 years. The frost creeping up on the new glass and 1 lamp burning on the flags. "You called him uncle," he said, "before 60 people, very quietly. It was the most frightening thing I have ever seen done. I learned it from you." She turned, Valerian. It was the first time she had used it. He came and took her cold hands and held them against his chest, and she let him, and there was nothing braced in her at all now, nothing waiting for a bill. "Say the word again," she said. "The one from the drawing-room. I should like to have it properly this time. Keep it." He said it. The lamp burned low on the orangery flags, and the frost climbed the new panes, and the rest of that night belonged to the 2 of them alone. They have been 11 years at Hartlyn now. The orangery bears more fruit than the house can use, and the surplus goes down to the village in a basket every Tuesday. There is a school in the old brewhouse with her name cut over the door, because he insisted upon it and she gave in. And the great grey house on the limestone shoulder has stopped eating its people. And when the Duke of Hartlyn is asked, as he occasionally still is by some fool who has not heard the story properly, what on earth possessed him to take a wife nobody else would have, he does not trouble to explain. He only looks down the length of the table at her, and says the one word, and lets the county make of it what it likes.